The first thing Marcus Johnson noticed that morning wasn't the screaming, it was the silence that came after. He'd been grabbing his usual coffee from Joe's Corner store on 5th and Madison when the power grid flickered, died, then came back wrong. The fluorescent lights above hummed with this sick, yellowish glow that made his skin crawl. Old Joe behind the counter had his eyes glued to the tiny television mounted in the corner, his weathered face going pale as milk. Marcus turned to look, still holding his steaming cup, and that's when everything went sideways. The news anchor, some put-together blonde woman who usually smiled through every disaster, looked absolutely terrified. Her voice cracked as she reported incidents of extreme violence spreading across downtown Seattle. People attacking each other. Biting. Not letting go. Marcus thought it was some kind of prank at first, maybe one of those viral hoax things his nephew was always talking about, but then the feed cut to helicopter footage and his coffee cup slipped right through his fingers. The streets below were chaos incarnate, bodies running, bodies chasing, bodies that moved all wrong, jerky and hungry and relentless. "Holy crap," Joe whispered, and Marcus couldn't have said it better himself. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he yanked it out to see texts flooding in from his sister Amanda, each one more frantic than the last. She was across town at the elementary school where she taught 3rd grade, and her messages painted a picture that made his blood run cold. Lockdown. Something's wrong. Parents aren't coming. Things outside. Can't explain. Marcus, I'm scared. He didn't think, just bolted for the door, leaving Joe standing there with his mouth hanging open. The street outside looked normal enough, too normal, actually, like the calm before a tornado touches down. A few cars rolled past, their drivers oblivious or in denial. Mrs. Chin from the flower shop was still arranging roses in her window display. Marcus sprinted toward his beat-up Ford pickup parked at the curb, fumbling for his keys, when he heard it. That scream he mentioned earlier. It came from the alley between the bakery and the old hardware store, high-pitched and abruptly cut off, and every instinct in his body said run the other way. But Marcus had never been good at listening to the smart part of his brain. He crept toward the alley, heart hammering against his ribs like it wanted out. The smell hit him first, copper and rot and something else, something chemical that burned his nostrils. Then he saw them. 3 figures hunched over what used to be a person, their movements spastic and wrong, making these awful wet sounds that would haunt him for the rest of his life, however long that turned out to be. One of them turned, and Marcus got his first real look at what the news was trying to explain. The thing had been a man once, probably recently, but now its eyes were clouded white, mouth smeared with red, skin gone gray like week-old meat. It didn't see Marcus so much as sense him, head tilting like a dog hearing a whistle, and then it lunged. Marcus had played linebacker in high school, kept himself in decent shape despite hitting 40 last year, but nothing prepared him for the pure speed of this thing. He barely got his arm up in time, catching the creature's jaw with his forearm while its teeth snapped inches from his face. The other 2 were turning now, attracted by the commotion, and Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he was about to die in a dirty Seattle alley on a random Tuesday morning. The gunshot cracked through the air like thunder, and the thing on Marcus dropped like someone cut its strings. He scrambled backward, hit the brick wall, and looked up to see a woman standing at the alley entrance with a smoking pistol held in a 2-handed grip. She was maybe 30, dark hair pulled back tight, wearing yoga pants and a tank top like she'd been interrupted mid-workout. "Don't just sit there gawking," she snapped, her voice carrying the sharp edge of someone used to being obeyed. "Move your butt unless you want to be lunch." The remaining 2 creatures were advancing on her now, and she fired twice more, calm as could be. One shot took the nearest attacker in the shoulder, barely slowing it down. The second caught it square in the forehead, and it collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. The third one got close enough that Marcus could see his chance, and he grabbed a discarded 2x4 from the ground and swung for the fences. The impact sent vibrations up his arms and the creature sideways into a dumpster, giving the woman time to line up her shot. Another crack, another body dropping. You bit? She demanded, already checking him over with experienced eyes. Marcus shook his head, still trying to catch his breath, still processing the fact that he'd just watched someone shoot 3 people without hesitation. Except they weren't people anymore, were they? I'm good, he managed. Just scared absolutely shitless. She almost smiled at that. Yeah, join the club. I'm Detective Riley Martinez, SPD. Or I was, about 20 minutes ago before everything went to hell in a handbasket. She was already moving, expecting him to follow, and Marcus did because what else was he going to do? Name's Marcus. I gotta get to Riverside Elementary, my sister's there with a bunch of kids. Riley stopped, turned back. That's clear across town. You got any idea what's between here and there right now? Marcus met her eyes. Don't care. She's all the family I got left. Something in his voice must have convinced her because she nodded once, sharp and decisive. All right then. But we do this smart, not heroic. Heroes get dead real quick. They made it to Marcus's truck without incident, though the street didn't look normal anymore. People were running now, flooding out of buildings with terror written across their faces. A few cars had crashed at the intersection, and Marcus could see shapes moving between them, could hear screaming that seemed to come from every direction at once. Drive fast but not stupid, Riley instructed, climbing into the passenger seat and checking her weapon. Those things are attracted to noise and movement, but we can outrun them in a vehicle. Problem's going to be when we hit gridlock. She wasn't wrong. Marcus pulled out and headed north, weaving between abandoned cars and stumbling pedestrians who might have been fleeing or might have been hunting. It was getting hard to tell the difference. The radio was a nightmare of emergency broadcasts and panicked voices. One station claimed it was a terrorist attack, some kind of biological weapon. Another blamed a pharmaceutical company's drug trial gone wrong. A third insisted it was the actual biblical apocalypse, and honestly, Marcus wasn't prepared to argue at this point. They'd made it about 6 blocks when they encountered the roadblock. Not an official one with police cars and barricades, those would come later, if there was a later, but a massive pileup of vehicles that completely choked the street. Damn it, Marcus hissed, slamming the brakes. Riley was already scanning their surroundings. We could go on foot from here, but it's 2 miles through downtown. That's a lot of exposure. Marcus was about to respond when a face slammed against his window, making him jump so hard he nearly hit his head on the roof. A woman, 30-something, normal-looking except for the blood on her business suit and the absolute terror in her eyes. Please, she sobbed, pounding on the glass. Please let me in, they're right behind me. Marcus looked past her and saw she wasn't lying. A pack of them, maybe a dozen, were stumbling around the pileup with that horrible jerky gait, and they'd definitely noticed the woman screaming. Riley cursed but unlocked the back door. Get in, now! The woman practically threw herself into the truck, slamming the door just as the first of those things reached them. It crashed against the vehicle's side, hands smearing blood across the window, mouth working soundlessly. More were coming, drawn by the commotion, and suddenly the truck was surrounded by bodies pressing in from all sides. Back up! Riley shouted, but Marcus was already moving, throwing the truck in reverse and gunning it. They hit something, someone, with a sickening thud, but he didn't let off the gas. Couldn't afford to. The truck lurched backward down the street, creatures bouncing off the hood and grill, until Marcus found enough room to whip around and take a side street. The woman in the back was crying, great heaving sobs that filled the cabin. Thank you, oh God, thank you, she kept repeating. You bit? Riley asked, twisting around to check. The woman shook her head violently. No, I'm clean, I swear. I was in my office when it started. My coworker Mike, he changed. Right in front of me. Started attacking people. I ran. She wiped at her face with shaking hands. I'm Jessica. Jessica Rodriguez. I don't understand what's happening. None of them did, not really, but Riley tried anyway, her cop instincts kicking in. Some kind of infection, spreads through bites or blood contact from what I've seen. Incubation seems fast, maybe minutes. Once you turn, you're gone. Just, hunger and aggression. Jessica made a small, broken sound. My husband. He was at the gym downtown. I can't reach him. Riley's expression softened slightly. Best thing you can do right now is survive. We'll figure out the rest later. Marcus navigated the side streets, taking a winding route that added distance but kept them away from the main roads where chaos reigned. They passed a convenience store being looted, not by zombies but by regular people, and somehow that seemed almost worse. Civilization was peeling away fast, the thin veneer of order dissolving in the face of primal fear. They passed a house where someone had already barricaded the windows with furniture. They passed a church with its doors thrown wide open, people streaming inside seeking sanctuary or maybe just answers from a god who seemed to have stepped out for a smoke break. Marcus kept driving, knuckles white on the steering wheel, thoughts fixed on Amanda and those kids trapped in a school that suddenly seemed very vulnerable. They were maybe 10 blocks from Riverside Elementary when they encountered the group. 7 people, men and women of various ages, clustered in the parking lot of an auto repair shop, clearly trying to decide what to do next. One of them, a big guy with a beard and coveralls stained with motor oil, stepped into the street and flagged them down. Marcus slowed, uncertain. Could be trouble, Riley warned, hand moving to her weapon. But the big guy had his hands up in a peaceful gesture, and the desperation on the faces behind him looked genuine. Marcus stopped. Rolled down his window a crack. You folks okay? The big guy nodded, breathing hard. Name's Tommy Garrett. I own this shop. We've been holding up here but there's too many of those things around now. We need to find somewhere safer, somewhere with walls and supplies. He glanced at the others behind him. Got my mechanic, Diego. 2 customers who were here when things went sideways, Beth and her daughter Lily. Couple others who took shelter here. We're not asking for a free ride, just information. You know anywhere safe? Marcus looked at Riley, who studied the group with a cop's eye. Finally, she nodded slightly. We're heading to Riverside Elementary, Marcus told them. Trying to get some kids and a teacher out. It's got fences, solid doors. Could work as a temporary shelter. Tommy's face brightened. Hell, I know that place. My nephew went there couple years back. Those fences are chain link but they're tall, and the building's brick and concrete. Got a cafeteria with food, nurse's office with medical supplies. He turned back to his group. What do you think? A woman holding the hand of a girl maybe 8 or 9 spoke up. That would be Beth and Lily. Anywhere's better than here. Those things already got Mr. Patterson from the print shop next door. Her voice was steady but her eyes betrayed her terror. We've been lucky so far but luck runs out. All right, Marcus decided. We can't all fit in the truck but it's not far. We stick together, move quiet and quick. Anyone bit? He looked each of them in the eye, and they all shook their heads. Diego, a wiry Latino guy in his 20s, spoke up. We checked each other already. We're clean. Riley climbed out of the truck, taking charge with natural authority. Okay, listen up. I'm former SPD. Here's how this works, we move in a tight group, no stragglers. Kids and anyone unarmed in the middle. If you've got weapons, I need to know now. Tommy produced a tire iron. Diego had a baseball bat from the shop's office. An older gentleman who introduced himself as Walter Boyd showed a hunting knife. Went through Korea, he said simply. I can handle myself. A younger woman, couldn't be more than 25, raised a shaking hand. "I'm Cassie Monroe. I don't have anything." Riley handed her a screwdriver from the shop. "It's not much, but it's pointy. Aim for the eyes or throat if anything gets close." They set out on foot, leaving the truck behind because the engine noise would draw too much attention. Marcus took point with Riley, Jessica, and Tommy on the flanks, the others clustered in the middle. The streets here were quieter but not empty. They saw creatures in the distance, heard screaming from inside buildings, once spotted a cop car sitting empty with its doors wide open and blood streaking the pavement. "Don't look," Riley told Lily, who Beth had wisely blindfolded with a scarf. The girl clutched her mother's hand in a stuffed rabbit, walking on trust alone. They were 4 blocks out when they encountered the horde. One moment the street ahead was clear, the next it was full of them, maybe 30 or 40 people who weren't people anymore, spilling around a corner like a wave of decay. Someone in the group, Cassie, Marcus thought, let out a yelp of fear, and that was all it took. The horde turned as one, those milky eyes fixing on the living flesh before them, and charged into the building, now! Riley screamed, pointing at an apartment complex to their right. Tommy didn't hesitate, putting his shoulder to the entrance door and busting it open. They piled inside, all 11 of them, and Marcus and Diego slammed the door shut just as the first bodies crashed against it. The door was glass and metal, not built to withstand this kind of assault, and cracks already spider-webbed across the panes. Stairs. Walter was already moving, shepherding Lily and Cassie toward the stairwell. They thundered up to the second floor as the entrance door finally gave way below them, the sound of breaking glass mixing with the awful moaning that seemed to be the only sound those things made. "Keep moving," Riley urged, but Tommy had stopped at apartment door marked 2C. "In here," he grunted, slamming his weight against it. The door frame splintered and gave way, and again they piled inside, Marcus being the last through before securing what was left of the door with a heavy bookshelf. The apartment was small, empty of people but fully furnished. Someone's home, abandoned in a hurry if the overturned coffee cup and blaring television were any indication. Diego moved to the window and looked down. "They're not leaving. Must be 15 of them down there now, just waiting." Beth had removed Lily's blindfold and was checking her over anxiously. "Baby, you okay?" The little girl nodded, though tears streaked her face. "I want to go home, Mommy." The simple statement broke something in the room, the weight of reality settling on all of them. Home wasn't safe anymore. Nowhere was. Jessica sat down hard on the couch, staring at nothing. Walter moved through the apartment with military efficiency, checking the other rooms. Empty. Fire escape out the bedroom window leads to the roof. "We get trapped here, that's our way out." Riley was already thinking ahead. "We can't stay here long. Every minute we wait, more of those things could show up." She looked at Marcus. "The school's what, 3 more blocks?" He nodded. "About that. We could try the rooftops, move building to building if they're close enough." Tommy scratched his beard. "Risky. Missing a jump means a fall or landing right in the middle of them." Cassie spoke up quietly. "Better than staying here to starve." She had a point. Diego was still at the window. "Hey, I got an idea. Might be crazy but hear me out. We can see the school from here, just barely. What if we create a distraction, draw most of them off, then make a run for it?" Riley frowned. "What kind of distraction?" Diego pointed toward the street. "There's cars down there. I'm a mechanic, right? Give me 5 minutes with the right vehicle and I can hotwire it, set something heavy on the gas pedal, aim it away from where we need to go. Sound and movement will pull them like moths to a flame." It was risky, maybe stupid, but Marcus couldn't think of a better option. "You'd have to go down there. Get to a car without getting swarmed." Diego shrugged with more confidence than he probably felt. "I'm fast. And I got these." He held up a set of keys with a Mercedes logo. "Found them in the shop, customer's car we were working on. It's parked right outside." Tommy clapped him on the shoulder. "I'll go with you. Two's safer than one." Riley looked like she wanted to argue but recognized the sense in it. "Okay. But you've got 3 minutes max. It goes wrong, you get back up here and we figure something else out." The two men headed for the stairwell while the others waited in tense silence. Marcus found himself next to Jessica, who'd pulled out her phone and was staring at a photo of a smiling man with his arm around her. "Your husband?" he asked gently. She nodded without looking up. "Derek. We were supposed to go to dinner tonight for our anniversary. 5 years." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Guess we're not making that reservation." From below, they heard the apartment building's ruined entrance door crash open further, heard the shuffling footsteps of those things spreading through the ground floor. There inside, Walter reported from his position by the apartment door. "Searching the rooms." Beth pulled Lily close, covering the girl's ears. Marcus moved to the window where he could see the parking lot. There, Tommy and Diego, creeping between vehicles toward a silver Mercedes. One of the creatures saw them, started that terrible moaning, but Diego was already at the car door. Tommy swung his tire iron, catching the creature in the temple with a sickening crack. It went down and stayed down. "Headshots," Marcus noted. "That's what it took." Diego got the car door open, slid inside, and bent over the steering wheel. The seconds crawled by like hours. More creatures were converging on the car. Tommy held them off as best he could, but for every one he dropped, 2 more appeared. Come on," Marcus muttered. Then the Mercedes roared to life, its horn blaring. Diego must have leaned on it deliberately, and the effect was immediate. Every creature in a 2-block radius turned toward that sound. Tommy jumped into the passenger seat and the car lurched forward, plowing through a small cluster of zombies before careening down the street with at least 20 of those things shambling after it. "Now!" Riley commanded, and they moved. Out of the apartment, down the stairs 3 at a time, through the ruined entrance and into the street. There were still stragglers, always stragglers, but nothing like the horde that had trapped them. Marcus led the way, using the tire iron Tommy had left behind to cave in the skull of a creature that lurched out of a doorway. Walter protected the rear, his hunting knife finding the eye socket of another. They ran like their lives depended on it because their lives absolutely depended on it. Riverside Elementary appeared ahead, its brick facade and chain-link fence suddenly the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen. The front gate was closed but not locked, and they piled through, Riley slamming it shut behind them. The schoolyard was empty, eerily so, but the building itself showed signs of life, lights on in some windows, shapes moving behind glass. Marcus sprinted for the main entrance, pounding on the heavy doors. Amanda, it's Marcus. Open up." For a terrifying moment nothing happened, and he imagined them all dead inside, imagined arriving too late. Then the door cracked open and his sister's face appeared, streaked with tears and terror and relief. "Marcus?" She threw the door wide and he pulled her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. "I got you, sis. I got you." They got everyone inside and Amanda locked the door behind them with shaking hands. The school's interior was dim, running on emergency lighting, and filled with the sound of crying children. Marcus did a quick count, looked like 30 kids, maybe, ranging from 1st to 5th grade based on size, plus Amanda and 2 other teachers he recognized, Mr. Peterson who taught gym, and Mrs. Kim from the front office. "We've been listening to the news," Amanda said, her voice brittle with barely controlled panic. "They're saying the whole city is infected, maybe the whole state. Military's supposed to be setting up safe zones but we haven't heard anything specific." Riley stepped forward. "Detective Riley Martinez. Former SPD. Right now, our priority is securing this location and taking stock of supplies. Then we figure out next moves." Her authoritative tone seemed to steady everyone, giving them something concrete to focus on. They split into teams. Walter and Mr. Peterson checked every door and window, making sure they were locked and reinforced where possible. Beth and Mrs. Kim worked to calm the children, organizing them in the cafeteria where they'd be easier to protect. Marcus, Amanda, and Riley did an inventory of supplies. The cafeteria had maybe a week's worth of food if they rationed carefully, longer if they stretched it. The nurse's office yielded basic medical supplies. There was bottled water in the storage room, enough for a few days. Not terrible, Riley assessed, but not good either. We can't stay here indefinitely. Jessica had found the school's radio and was scanning frequencies, looking for official broadcasts. Most were just static or emergency alerts on repeat, but she finally found a voice, a military frequency that crackled with partial information. Evacuation zones at the following locations: Jefferson Park, Memorial Stadium, bring only essential supplies, screening for infection mandatory, deadly force authorized. The message repeated, cutting out occasionally. Memorial Stadium is maybe 5 miles from here, Amanda said. If the military's really there, if they have defenses and supplies. She didn't need to finish. It was hope, fragile and maybe foolish, but hope nonetheless. Marcus looked around at their group, 11 adults and 30 kids, all looking to them for answers they didn't have. We'd have to move everyone. In daylight, so we can see threats coming. Would need vehicles, supplies, a route planned down to the last detail. Tommy, who'd returned with Diego in the Mercedes right after the others got inside, they'd bailed from the car when it finally crashed into a storefront 3 blocks away and made it to the school on foot, spoke up. I got a school bus we use for hauling parts sometimes. Reinforced frame because we move heavy equipment. It's at my shop. Could fit everyone if we squeeze. That's back the way we came, Diego pointed out. Through streets we know are crawling with those things. Walter was studying a map of Seattle someone had pulled from a classroom. Could go around, take the waterfront route. It's longer but more open, harder for them to set up ambushes. Mr. Peterson, a stocky guy in his 50s who looked like he could still run a decent 40-yard dash, joined the discussion. I played offensive line for UW back in the day. I can move fast, hit hard. You need someone to run interference, I'm in. The plan started to take shape. A small team would go for the bus at first light, Tommy because he knew where it was, Diego because he could drive anything, Marcus because he wasn't letting Tommy risk it alone, and Riley because she had the gun and the training. The rest would fortify the school and prepare the kids for evacuation. It wasn't a great plan, but it was a plan, and that was something. They settled in for the night, though calling it rest would be generous. The adults took shifts on watch while the children slept fitfully on cafeteria mats. Marcus found himself on the midnight to 2 a.m. shift with Cassie, the young woman who'd been so scared earlier but was now showing surprising backbone. They sat in the main hallway with flashlights, listening to the sounds of the city dying outside. Distant gunfire. Sirens that eventually stopped. Screaming that cut off too quickly. Once, something heavy slammed against the gym door repeatedly, but eventually whatever it was wandered away. You think we'll actually make it? Cassie asked quietly. To the stadium, I mean. You think the military's really there? Marcus wanted to lie, wanted to offer easy comfort, but she deserved honesty. I think we got a shot. Better than staying here and waiting for food to run out. She nodded, accepting that. I was supposed to start a new job Monday. Marketing coordinator at a tech startup. Spent 3 years in school, 6 months job hunting. Finally got my break. She laughed softly. Funny what matters when the world ends. Dawn came cold and gray, filtering through barricaded windows. Marcus grabbed a quick breakfast, some kind of granola bar that tasted like cardboard, and gathered with the others on the extraction team. Riley checked her weapon, discovered she had maybe 15 rounds left. Not great. Tommy had fashioned makeshift armor from textbooks and duct tape, wrapping them around his forearms and chest. It looked ridiculous but might actually help against bites. Diego stretched like an athlete before a big game, all nervous energy. Let's do this before I remember how stupid it is, he said. Amanda pulled Marcus aside, gripped his shoulders hard. You come back, you hear me? You're all I got left." He hugged her tight. "Same goes for you. Anything happens, you get these kids out. Don't wait for us." She started to protest, but he cut her off. "Promise me, Mandy." She finally nodded, using his childhood nickname. "I promise. Now go get our ride." They left through the back exit, the one facing away from the main street where they'd seen most of the zombie activity. The morning air smelled wrong, smoke and rot and something chemical from fires burning unchecked across the city. The skyline looked different too, columns of black smoke rising from a dozen locations. They moved in formation, Riley on point, Marcus and Tommy flanking, Diego protected in the middle because they'd need him to drive. The streets were a nightmare landscape of abandoned cars, broken windows, bodies that neither moved nor needed to. They passed a playground where something had gone very wrong, evidenced by the blood on the swings, and Marcus made himself not think about it. They passed a barricade that had failed, the furniture and cars arranged carefully but not carefully enough, the defenders now part of the horde they'd tried to keep out. Tommy's shop was 6 blocks that felt like 60, but they made it with only 2 encounters. The first was a lone zombie in a postal worker's uniform that Riley dropped with a single shot. The second was a trio that came around a corner at the same moment they did, and Tommy's homemade armor proved its worth when one of them bit down on his forearm and got nothing but textbook. Marcus caved in its skull with a crowbar they'd picked up, Diego took another with his bat, and when had Walter joined them? Marcus looked back and realized the old Korean War vet had followed despite being told to stay behind. Walter took the third with his knife, moving with practiced efficiency. "Told you I could handle myself," was all he said. The shop appeared untouched, which seemed like a miracle until Marcus realized the metal shutters were down and locked. "Smart," Tommy said with approval. "I closed up before we left yesterday." "Habit." He unlocked them and they rolled the shutters up just enough to slip inside. The shop was dark and smelled like oil and metal, familiar and almost comforting. And there, in the back bay, sat the bus. It was yellow like a school bus but bulkier, with metal plates welded to the sides and a reinforced grille on the front. "She's a beauty," Diego breathed, already. Moving toward it. Tommy grabbed keys from his office. "Filled her up last week. Should have a full tank." While Diego got the bus running, the others scavenged. Tommy had a decent stash of tools that could serve as weapons. There were some bottles of water, energy drinks, even a mini fridge with sandwiches that were only a day old. Walter found a first aid kit that was better stocked than the school's. Riley discovered a gun safe in the office. "Tommy, you holding out on us?" she called. Tommy had the decency to look sheepish. "Second Amendment and all that. Got my permits, all legal." Inside the safe were 2 more handguns, a shotgun, and ammunition for all of them. Riley's expression when she saw the shotgun was almost blissful. "Oh, you beautiful thing," she murmured, checking it over with expert hands. The bus engine roared to life, startling them all, and the shop's main door began to rattle. The noise had attracted attention. "Time to go!" Diego yelled from the driver's seat. They piled into the bus, Tommy hitting the button that opened the main garage door, and Diego gunned it before the door was even fully up. They scraped through with inches to spare, metal screaming against metal, and then they were out on the street. Zombies were converging from all directions, drawn by the engine noise, but the bus's reinforced body let Diego plow right through them. The sickening thumps and bumps as they hit bodies would feature in Marcus's nightmares for years to come, assuming he lived long enough to have years. The ride back to the school was harrowing. They had to detour twice around block streets, once nearly getting stuck in an underpass where abandoned cars created a maze. Zombies threw themselves at the bus with mindless aggression, cracking windows but not breaking through. Diego drove like a man possessed, taking corners too fast and mounting curbs when necessary. When Riverside Elementary finally came into view, Marcus felt relief so intense it was almost painful. Mr. Peterson opened the gate for them and Diego pulled the bus right into the schoolyard, as close to the building as possible. They'd made it. Step 1 complete. Amanda met Marcus at the bus door, checking him over for injuries with teacher mom intensity. "I'm good," he assured her. "Better than good. We got transport and weapons." Loading the kids onto the bus was organized chaos. The teachers had done good work, getting everyone packed and ready with backpacks full of snacks and water bottles. Beth kept Lily close, whispering reassurances. Cassie helped the smallest children find seats, making sure they had seat belts on like that would matter if things went really wrong. Mrs. Kim did a head count twice, making sure all 30 kids were accounted for. Jessica had kept monitoring the radio and had better information now. The stadium broadcast is stronger. They're definitely there, definitely taking survivors. But they're saying the infection has spread to Tacoma and Everett too. Might be statewide by now. That was a problem for later. Right now, they needed to focus on 5 miles of Seattle streets between them and possible salvation. They pulled out with Riley and Mr. Peterson in the bus's front seats with Diego, armed and watching for threats. Marcus stood in the aisle, holding on the seat backs, trying to project a calm he didn't feel. The kids were scared but trying to be brave, which somehow made it worse. One little boy, couldn't be more than 6, looked up at him with wide eyes. "Mister, are the monsters going to eat us?" Marcus crouched down to his level. "No way, buddy. We got the best driver, the best fighters, and the best escape bus in the whole city. Those monsters don't stand a chance." The kid seemed to accept this, turning back to his toy car. If only it were that simple. The route Walter had planned took them toward the waterfront, where the wider streets and open spaces gave them room to maneuver. It worked for the first mile. Then they hit the checkpoint. It wasn't military, too disorganized, too desperate. A group of survivors had blocked off a major intersection with cars and debris, and armed people stood on top of the barricade. As the bus approached, one of them fired a warning shot. "Stop right there," a man shouted through a megaphone. Diego hit the brakes, the bus skidding to a halt. Riley was already moving toward the door, badge out. "Detective Riley Martinez, Seattle PD. We're evacuating to the Memorial Stadium safe zone. We don't want trouble." The man with the megaphone climbed down from the barricade, revealing himself to be middle-aged, bearded, carrying a hunting rifle. "Yeah, well, trouble's all there is these days. You got supplies on that bus. We got hungry people behind this wall. You want through, you pay the toll." Marcus felt anger flare hot in his chest. The world was ending and people were still finding ways to be awful to each other. But Riley kept her cool. "We've got kids on here. 30 elementary school kids. You really want to rob children?" The man wavered, and Marcus saw doubt flicker across his face. But another voice rang out from behind the barricade, a woman's voice, harsh and afraid. "They might be infected. We can't let anyone through who might be carrying it." The situation was deteriorating fast. More people were appearing on the barricade, all armed, all scared. Scared people with guns made bad decisions. Riley tried again. "We're all clean. No one's been bitten. We've been isolated at the school for the past 18 hours. The bearded man shook his head. "Can't take that risk. Turn around, find another way." But there was no other way, not without adding miles to the journey through areas that were probably worse. Tommy stood up from his seat. "Marcus, get ready to hold on." Before anyone could ask what he meant, Tommy moved forward and said something to Diego, whose eyes widened. "You sure?" Tommy nodded. "Do it." Diego slammed the bus into reverse, backed up 50 feet, then shifted gears. "Everyone hold on!" Marcus shouted, and then Diego was accelerating toward the barricade. The people on top scattered, diving for safety, and the bus hit the improvised wall like a battering ram. Cars shifted, debris flew, and momentum carried them through. Gunshots rang out, but most went wild, fired by panicking people who'd never expected someone to actually charge them. The bus burst out the other side of the barricade with a screech of tortured metal and kept going. One of the side mirrors was gone and several windows were cracked, but they'd made it through. Behind them, Marcus could see the barricade people scrambling, but whether to chase or repair their defenses, he couldn't tell. Didn't matter. They were clear. "Everyone okay?" Amanda called out, moving through the bus to check kids. A few were crying, several were wide-eyed with shock, but no one was hurt. Diego's hands were shaking on the wheel, but he kept driving, kept them moving. The waterfront stretched out to their left, Elliott Bay gray and choppy under overcast skies. Under other circumstances it might have been beautiful. As it was, it just felt empty, like the world had been erased. They saw more evidence of the city's collapse, a fire station with its doors torn open, emergency vehicles sitting silent and useless. A hotel with every window broken, dark shapes moving inside. A police car on its roof in the middle of the road, how it got that way a mystery Marcus didn't want to solve. They gave everything a wide berth, staying in the middle of the street where Diego could see threats coming. Mile 3 brought them to the Marina District, and that's where they found the crowd. At first Marcus thought it was zombies, just a huge horde, but then he realized these people were moving with purpose, not the mindless shambling of the infected. Hundreds of survivors, maybe thousands, all heading in the same direction. Toward the stadium. "We got company," Riley observed, scanning the crowd through binoculars. "Mix of people. Some armed, some not. Look pretty desperate." Diego slowed the bus to a crawl, honking the horn to clear a path. People moved aside, some banging on the bus's sides as they passed, shouting questions. "You know if the stadium's real? You got room for more? Please, my kid is sick, can you help?" It tore at Marcus's heart, but they couldn't stop, couldn't afford to get bogged down. The bus pushed through the human river, and gradually the crowd thinned as people without vehicles fell behind. Then they saw it. Memorial Stadium rose up ahead, its massive concrete structure suddenly looking like a castle fortress. But more importantly, they saw the military. Actual army personnel in combat gear, manning checkpoints and barricades that made that group's attempted roadblock look like a child's blanket fort. Humvees with mounted guns, concrete barriers, razor wire. And survivors being processed through in an organized fashion, checked over by people in hazmat suits before being allowed inside. "Holy hell," Tommy breathed. They actually did it. Hope, that dangerous thing, bloomed in Marcus's chest. They might actually survive this. The bus rolled up to the checkpoint and Riley stepped out with her hands visible, calling out their situation. The soldiers were professional, efficient. They'd done this before, processed other groups. Everyone had to be checked for bites, had to be observed for symptoms. The kids were scared of the soldiers in their intimidating gear, but the medical personnel were kind, practiced at soothing frightened children. One by one, they were cleared. Marcus stood still while someone in a hazmat suit examined every inch of exposed skin, shone lights in his eyes, took his temperature. When he got the all clear, the relief was overwhelming. Amanda cleared. The kids cleared. Tommy, Diego, Walter, Riley, Jessica, Beth and Lily, Cassie, Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Kim, all clear. All survivors. All safe, at least for now. They were directed into the stadium, where the sight that greeted them was surreal. The field had been converted into a massive refugee camp, tents and supply stations organized with military precision. There had to be thousands of people inside already, maybe tens of thousands. A soldier with a tablet was assigning them to a section, explaining the rules. Stay in your designated area. Food distribution 3 times a day. Medical tent if anyone needs attention. Strict curfew at night. Anyone showing symptoms of infection would be quarantined immediately. It sounded harsh, but Marcus understood. This place was working because people followed the rules. Their group got assigned to Section D, a cluster of tents near the 40-yard line. It wasn't comfortable, wasn't home, but it was safe, and that was everything. The kids from Amanda's class clustered together, shell-shocked but alive. The teachers worked to establish some sense of normalcy, unpacking what supplies they'd brought. Marcus found himself sitting on the ground with his back against a tent pole, exhaustion hitting him all at once. Riley sat down next to him, and they didn't speak for a long moment, just existed in the quiet. "We made it," she finally said, like she couldn't quite believe it. Marcus nodded. "Yeah. We really did." Tommy wandered over with Diego, both men looking like they'd aged 10 years in 2 days. "They're saying this is one of dozens of safe zones around the country. Military's holding them, keeping the infected out while they figure out next steps." He paused. "They're also saying it's bad. Really bad. Most major cities are overrun." Jessica appeared, and for the first time since they'd met her, she was smiling. "I found him. Derek, my husband. He's here. He made it to the East Side safe zone and they bust everyone here this morning." Tears streamed down her face, but they were happy tears, joyful tears, and she hugged each of them fiercely before running off to find him. "Well damn," Diego said softly. "Guess miracles still happen." The rest of that first day in the stadium passed in a blur. They ate military rations that tasted like cardboard and heaven simultaneously. They listened to briefings from officers who explained that the infection was being contained, that the military was pushing back, that there was hope for reclaiming the cities. Whether that was true or just necessary propaganda, Marcus couldn't say. But it helped. People needed hope. That night, lying on a cot in a tent surrounded by the sound of thousands of breathing refugees, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them here. Thought about Joe at the corner store, wondered if he'd made it out. Thought about the people at that barricade, hoped they'd eventually see reason and make for a safe zone. Thought about all the strangers they'd passed, the ones they'd helped and the ones they couldn't. 2 days ago, he'd been a regular guy worried about regular things, bills, whether his truck needed new tires, if he'd remembered to DVR his favorite show. Now he was a survivor of the zombie apocalypse, which would have been laughable if it wasn't so absolutely real. But he'd also discovered things about himself, about the people around him. That Amanda was even stronger than he'd known. That complete strangers could become a family when survival demanded it. That heroes didn't wear capes, they wore mechanics' coveralls and yoga pants and teachers' casual Friday outfits. The next morning brought new routines. Amanda organized school lessons for the kids in her section, determined to give them some structure and normalcy. Mr. Peterson led exercise sessions, keeping people active and healthy. Mrs. Kim helped with the stadium's administrative needs, her organizational skills invaluable. Tommy and Diego volunteered with the mechanics unit, keeping the safe zone's vehicles running. Walter shared his military experience, training younger survivors in basic defense. Riley joined the security force, her police background making her a natural fit. Cassie worked in the medical tent, discovering a talent for comforting frightened patients. Beth and Lily settled into the family section, connecting with other parents and children. Jessica reunited with Derek, became advocates for separated families, helping people find lost loved ones through the military's database. Marcus found his place too, joining the supply runs. Small teams would venture out under heavy military escort to scavenge resources from the abandoned city, food, medicine, clothing, anything useful. It was dangerous work, the streets still crawling with infected, but someone had to do it and Marcus discovered he was good at it. Good at staying calm under pressure, good at thinking fast, good at getting his team home safe. Each run was a story in itself, the time they found a pharmacy untouched and scored medications that saved lives in the medical tent. The time they had to fight off a horde of 50 infected to secure a truck full of canned goods. The time they rescued a family trapped on a rooftop, their tears of gratitude making every risk worthwhile. Slowly, day by day, the safe zone grew more organized, more efficient, more like a functioning community than a desperate refugee camp. Weeks passed, then months. The infection never fully disappeared, but the military learned to manage it, creating cleared zones and secure routes between safe areas. Scientists worked on understanding the disease, and while a cure remained elusive, they developed better detection methods and containment protocols. Society began the long, painful process of rebuilding. Memorial Stadium remained a hub, but satellite communities sprouted up, protected and supplied by the military. Some people eventually left, trying to reclaim their old homes or start fresh somewhere new. Others stayed, finding purpose in the collective effort of survival. Marcus's group, the people who'd survived that desperate journey from Riverside Elementary, remained close. They'd been through something that bonded them in ways that peaceful times never could. Amanda continued teaching, her classroom now a tent but her dedication unchanged. Those kids she'd protected, they grew up with a story about how their teacher and a group of brave adults had saved them when the world ended. Some of them, as they got older, joined the supply teams or security forces, paying forward the gift of survival they'd been given. Riley became head of security for the whole stadium zone, her natural leadership and crisis experience making her indispensable. Tommy and Diego opened a new garage on the stadium's outskirts, repairing everything from military vehicles to bicycles, keeping the community mobile. Walter trained dozens of young people in survival skills, the old veteran finding new purpose and teaching the next generation. Jessica and Derek started a communications network, helping survivors across different safe zones stay in touch. Beth taught school alongside Amanda while Lily grew into a remarkable young woman who wanted to be a doctor, inspired by the medics who'd helped them. Cassie did become that doctor, or at least a nurse, her compassion and quick thinking saving countless lives. Mr. Peterson organized sports leagues, giving kids and adults alike a healthy outlet. Mrs. Kim ran the administrative operations that kept thousands of people fed, housed, and accounted for. And Marcus? He kept running supplies, kept bringing back the resources that kept people alive, but he also found time for more. He started a training program for new supply runners, teaching them the lessons he'd learned the hard way. He helped expand the cleared zones, street by street, block by block, slowly reclaiming the city from the infected. He built a life in the new world, different from the one he'd lost but meaningful in its own right. Sometimes, on quiet nights, he'd stand at the edge of the stadium and look out at Seattle's skyline, still marked by darkness and ruin but also by lights, safe zones, outposts, communities that refused to give up. It wasn't the world they'd had before, would never be that again, but it was a world they'd fought for, bled for, survived for. The story of that first desperate run from the city streets to Memorial Stadium became something of a legend in the safe zone. People would ask Marcus about it, and he'd tell them the truth, that it wasn't about being fearless or heroic, it was about making the next right choice, then the next one, then the next. It was about ordinary people doing extraordinary things because the alternative was unthinkable. It was about unity in the face of darkness, about choosing to help instead of hinder, about remembering humanity when everything seemed designed to strip it away. The zombie invasion had spread darkness across the streets, had torn down civilization and tested everyone who survived. But it had also revealed something important, something powerful. That when pushed to the edge, people could choose compassion over cruelty, cooperation over conflict, hope over despair. Not everyone made that choice, as the barricade proved, but enough did. Enough to matter. Enough to rebuild. Years later, when the infection had been pushed back to manageable levels and true cities began to rise again from the ruins, people would ask Marcus if he missed the old world. He'd think about it honestly before answering. He missed the innocence of not knowing how fragile everything was. He missed the people who didn't make it. He missed the luxury of worrying about small things. But he didn't miss who he'd been, a guy going through the motions, disconnected from community, unsure of his purpose. The apocalypse had taken almost everything, but it had also given him something precious. It had shown him what he was capable of, introduced him to people who became family, and given him a mission that mattered. Would he trade it all to go back? To prevent the outbreak and return to that Tuesday morning at Joe's corner store? He honestly didn't know. But he did know this: when darkness spread across the streets, when the zombie invasion turned the world inside out, when everything fell apart, they had come together. They had survived. They had built something new from the ashes. And that was a story worth living, worth telling, worth passing on to the next generation who would inherit this strange, scarred, resilient new world. The tale of unity against the zombie invasion wasn't really about the zombies at all, Marcus realized. It was about the people who refused to become monsters themselves, who held on to their humanity when every excuse existed to abandon it. It was about Amanda protecting her students, Riley protecting strangers, Tommy sharing his resources, Diego risking his life, Walter offering his experience, Jessica keeping hope, Beth shielding her daughter, Cassie finding courage, and a dozen others making similar choices in similar moments across the dying city. Multiply those choices by thousands, by millions, and you got survival. You got community. You got a future. The darkness had spread, yes, but so had the light of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And in the end, in that eternal struggle between darkness and light, between the mindless hunger of the infected and the determined compassion of the survivors, compassion won. Not easily, not without cost, but definitively. That was the real story. That was what mattered. That was what Marcus carried with him every day as he worked to build something better, something worthy of the sacrifice that had made it possible. When darkness spread across the streets, they had met it with unity, with courage, with an unwillingness to surrender their humanity. And somehow, impossibly, beautifully, they had prevailed.